It is Euronews now. I'm Helena Humphrey. Here are your top stories. 1 year on, in Afghanistan, the Taliban marks their first year in power, with the country in the grip of one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. In Egypt, dozens of people are killed and many more injured after a fire rips through a Coptic church in the city of Giza. And fears of a potential nuclear disaster at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia power plant loom large after renewed shelling shuts down 3 turbines used to cool reactors.
On the streets of Kabul, the Taliban celebrate the first anniversary of their return to power in Afghanistan. The milestone has been marked with a national holiday, despite a year marred by economic struggles, as Taliban members chanted victory slogans and posed for selfies next to the US Embassy.
We are very happy that we defeated America. My message to the people who have escaped abroad, who are doctors and engineers who were working for the previous government, is that they should come back to their own country. The arms of the Islamic Emirate are open for them. We need them.
I'm very happy that I've come along with my friends to celebrate independence and the defeat of Americans and their slaves. All my friends are here, and we're all happy that we're celebrating independence, standing in front of the US Embassy. I'm so happy that I can't even express myself correctly.
But for ordinary Afghans, particularly women, the hardships have increased. This children's hospital is under-resourced and running out of much-needed medical supplies. With a capacity for 300 patients, 500 are crammed in beds. The Taliban remain internationally isolated and largely cut off from the flow of aid. A new UN report warns that continued drought and poor harvest, as well as inflation, threaten to increase the poverty and hunger crisis.
It is a year to the day since the Taliban entered Kabul and took control of Afghanistan. The fall of the capital came after a US decision to pull troops out of the country, and since then, the lives of millions have been upended, with the country in the grip of a humanitarian crisis and girls deprived of secondary education. Well, with me now is Bill Roggio, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Welcome, Bill. Great to have you with us. In these 12 months, life has changed dramatically for millions of Afghans. Do you think that the US State Department estimated that things would change quite so quickly?
The US government calculation when it announced the withdrawal, I believe that the Afghan government had several years before they would be under threat of a Taliban takeover. It wound up, it only took 3.5 months. The U.S. government, the Biden administration, the State Department, the Department of Defense, the U.S. intelligence agencies, they vastly underestimated the Taliban's strengths. The U.S. government did nothing to help assure or to leave behind something that could fight the Taliban. Even if the Afghan government had to draw back, it had to reorganize its military, there was no opportunity for the Afghans to prepare for life after U.S. withdrawal.
So, Bill, where does this leave things now then? Because recently, of course, we've seen the death of the al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri in Kabul. What does this tell us then about, I guess, the threat of al-Qaeda and its relationship with the Taliban?
Yeah, aside from the plight of the Afghan people, which is horrific, Afghanistan has now become a full-fledged state sponsor of terrorism. Afghanistan is a safe haven for terrorist groups. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the head of al-Qaeda, is not in Afghanistan alone. He has a staff. He has, a military council, a political leadership that is close by. The Biden administration said al-Qaeda was gone when he announced the withdrawal, and yet within a year of the U.S. leaving, the head of al-Qaeda is killed, not just in the mountainous area or remote area of Afghanistan, but in the heart of Afghanistan, in its capital, in Kabul.
And so what then about a plan from Washington to deal with a growing threat from al-Qaeda as well as ISIS-K as well? Is there something substantial?
There is no substantial plan. It's relying on over-the-horizon counterterrorism strikes. Despite the killing of Zawahiri, this was done by the CIA. The Over-the-Horizon Counterterrorism Center, which was set up to deal with terrorism threats, has produced 0 target packages for the administration. So one strike does not make a successful policy. It's an outlier in this case. Again, as I mentioned, there are numerous al-Qaeda leaders and operatives based in Afghanistan, despite administration claims to the contrary. Remember, they told us al-Qaeda was done, and yet al-Qaeda's leader is there. We can't trust them on the intelligence and its strategy to target al-Qaeda and other terrorist leaders, including the Islamic State, it's weak at best.
Relatives of the victims of one of Egypt's worst fire tragedies in recent years are mourning the dead. At least 41 people died, many of them children, when what's thought to have been an electrical fault sparked a blaze at a Coptic church in Giza City near Cairo. About 5,000 people had been inside the building at the time. Flames and smoke blocked an entrance, causing a stampede. Some people reportedly jumped from higher floors of the building in an attempt to escape. The church included a nursery for children. Witnesses described how people rushed into the burning building to rescue those trapped, but were soon overwhelmed by the heat and smoke. 16 people were injured, including 4 policemen involved in the rescue effort. Meanwhile, the country's chief prosecutor has ordered an investigation into the fire, and a team of prosecutors were dispatched to the church. Most of the victims are said to have died from smoke inhalation.
The Russian Defense Ministry has published footage of what it describes as the aftermath of Ukrainian shelling at the Kaihuka hydroelectric power plant. 3 of the 6 turbines are said to have been shut down. Disruptions to the power generation and water discharge systems could badly affect the cooling systems at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear reactors. Ukraine and Russia continue to raise safety fears at the Zaporizhzhia plant amid fresh shelling around the facility. For locals living nearby, it stirs memories of the last nuclear disaster at Chernobyl.
There's nothing good in what's going on, and we don't know how it will end up.
People are nervous as the nuclear power plant is nearby. Often the wind blows in our direction. So the radiation will blow immediately to us, and it will get into the water.
In his latest nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russians who don't speak out against the war in Ukraine as being complicit.
And no matter who you are, both on the territory of Russia and abroad, your voice should sound in support of Ukraine and against this war.
Meanwhile, the First World Food Programme wheat shipment for Ethiopia has left the Black Sea port of Odessa. The ship Brave Commander is carrying 23,000 metric tons of grain. Ethiopia is one of 5 countries already experiencing famine-like conditions.
Iran says Salman Rushdie and his supporters are to blame as it tries to distance itself from the attack last week that severely wounded the British-American writer. Rushdie was stabbed repeatedly at a public appearance in New York State. He had spent years under police protection after Iranian leaders called for his killing.
In this regard, no one can blame the Islamic Republic of Iran. We believe that the insults made and the support he received was an insult against followers of all religions.
Rushdie faced scores of death threats for his portrayal of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad in the 1988 novel The Centenic Verses. Some people consider it blasphemous, and it triggered outrage. As news emerged of Friday's attack, eyes turned to Tehran. Iran's foreign ministry says it has no further information about the author's assailant, categorically denying any link.
Stay with us, plenty more to come after a short break.